The U.S. is prepared to destroy the rogue nation if its regime threatens America. This is Outnumbered. I'm Sandra Smith. Here today, Harris Faulkner, co-host of After the Bell on Fox Business, Melissa Francis, Republican strategist and Fox News contributor Lisa Booth, and today's #OneLuckyGuy, the former governor from the great state of Arkansas, and Fox News contributor Mike Huckabee is here, and he is outnumbered. Governor, welcome back, and what a great day to have you.
Oh, what a terrific day. I mean, there's a little bit of news going on, and most of it right here in Manhattan.
Just a
little bit. But an amazing speech, I thought, by the president today. Refreshing to see a president speak honestly, candidly, forcefully at the UN. We haven't seen that in many, many years from a U.S. president.
All right, let's dig right into it and begin, leaving no room for misinterpretation. President Trump, in his first address, using some of his harshest and most clear language to date on the North Korean threat, denouncing the rogue nation and its leader, Kim Jong-un, for threatening the world with its nuclear weapons.
Now North Korea's reckless pursuit of nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles threatens the entire world with unthinkable loss of human life. It is an outrage that some nations would not only trade with such a regime, but would arm, supply, and financially support a country that imperils the world with nuclear conflict. No nation on earth has an interest in seeing this band of criminals arm itself with nuclear weapons and missiles.
And the president making it clear the U.S. may have no choice but to totally destroy Kim's regime and act alone if need be.
The United States has great strength and patience, but if it is forced to defend itself or its allies, we will have no choice but to totally destroy North Korea. Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself and for his regime. The United States is ready, willing, and able, but hopefully this will not be necessary. That's what the United Nations is all about. That's what the United Nations is for. Let's see how they do. It is time for North Korea to realize that the denuclearization is its only acceptable future.
Governor Huckabee, how does this change things?
Well, I love the clarity of the speech. I love the forcefulness of it. I know there are going to be a lot of criticisms that Donald Trump used language like, Rocket Man is on a suicide mission. I love that phrase because what he did, he made it very clear that this is not a diplomat speaking. Diplomats basically are insincere people speaking in a polite way when they really don't mean it, and they're saying things they have no intention of doing. Donald Trump said things today that was not diplomatic, but it was bold, it was clear, and I think he sort of probably shocked some people at the UN. They're not used to hearing this kind of talk. I loved it, and I thought it was exactly on point. He was saying to this group of people that if North Korea does not learn to behave, they could potentially be annihilated because we're not going to put up with it. Now, that's stout stuff.
So does that boldness, does that shock, Melissa, does that bring other nations around in confronting North Korea?
I think that a lot of that speech, and specifically that part, was aimed at China. That they were saying, he was saying very clearly on behalf of the U.S. that we are not going to stand for this. You don't want the other outcome. You do not want total annihilation and destruction next to you. I mean it. I will do it. And also that the only acceptable outcome is denuclearization, saying we are not going to stand by and allow this to just continue and wait in this policy of strategic patience or whatever else it has been, that he's not going to abide by it. And so I think that that message really in large part was to China.
Lisa?
Well, I do think there's that message to China because he did specifically mention that, no reasonable nation would trade with North Korea, right? So, I mean, that's a straight shot to China to talk about trade, to talk about how they shouldn't be doing business with North Korea. And I do think the Rocket Man line was intentional. This was a very substantive, thoughtful speech. So clearly that was an intentional line. I think he was trying to differentiate himself from President Obama's policies of strategic patience. And I think the administration right now is certainly trying to grapple with what to do with North Korea and looking at things that we've done previously. You look at Bill Clinton agreement with North Korea did not work. You look at the six-party talks attempt under George W. Bush, also didn't work. Strategic patience under President Obama did not work. So I think President Trump right now is sort of looking at all options on the table of how do we deal with this rogue regime.
So high praise from the couch so far, but Harris, it's not coming from everywhere. California Democratic Senator Dianne Feinstein had this to say after the speech. Let's listen. Oh, okay, we're going to actually read what she said. The goals of the United Nations are to foster peace and promote global cooperation. Today, the president used it as a stage to threaten war. He missed an opportunity to present any positive actions the UN could take with respect to North Korea. And he launched a diatribe against Iran, again offering no path forward. She's saying he used this as a stage to threaten war.
You know, it's interesting. We've heard the word war with regard to North Korea in two different ways at the United Nations this week. We saw the UN ambassador, Nikki Haley, use it, saying that we're running out of diplomatic ways to keep ourselves from getting to that point, which means everything's on the table. And they are now having a singular message come out of the White House on this and from other areas of the Trump administration, which was important. I think that war language probably is what people will listen to more than this war language, because the party in charge is saying it and they mean it, as you said. Yeah. I would point out something that I thought was impressive that the president did today. He made it very clear what America first means. And, you know, for all of us who live in America and you see the Make America Great hats and so on and so forth, it has a different meaning than it does to the rest of the world. I think they were curious to know. So are we, as the rest of the world, going to be left out of what you do? Is it more isolationist? He broke it down. And it wasn't a, if you're with us, you're with us, and if you're not, you're not. It was far more inclusive than that, but it was very stern, his message, on what it takes to go forward as a united body and what his expectations are. You know, he didn't talk about the building across the street this time, Governor. He talked about the substance. I thought that was very helpful, and I thought it was very telling.
I thought it was, again, very appropriate because he reset the United States' role in the United Nations. And he reminded the UN what it was supposed to be. I thought going back to the history, the founding, the essence of what this organization was supposed to be about was very powerful, because he didn't say this is what I wanted to be. He basically said this is what we agreed it would be. Now let's make it that. And then he pointed out you've got rogue nations like North Korea and like Iran, and that the U.S. isn't going to stand by. And if they don't want to join, then, you know, they'll go it alone. We'll go it alone if we have to.
All right. On Iran, President Trump also has hostile words for that country, which he says is a murderous regime that hides behind the veneer of democracy as it exports mayhem and terror around the world.
It is far past time for the nations of the world to confront another reckless regime, one that speaks openly of mass murder, vowing death to America, destruction to Israel, and ruin for many leaders and nations in this room. The Iranian government masks a corrupt dictatorship behind the false guise of a democracy.
And the president blasting the nuclear deal Iran reached with his predecessor, President Obama, calling it the worst deal ever and that he's prepared to walk away from it.
The Iran deal was one of the worst and most one-sided transactions the United States has ever entered into. Frankly, that deal is an embarrassment to the United States, and I don't think you've heard the last of it. Believe me.
Now, when you're watching that speech, Governor Huckabee, there's a lot of interaction, a lot of response that you were seeing from world leaders, including Benjamin Netanyahu, who after the speech sent this out via Twitter. In over 30 years in my experience with the UN, I have never heard a bolder or more courageous speech.
Couldn't agree more. And I think that the only other time I've seen a world leader walk into that forum and speak anywhere near that level of boldness was, in fact, Benjamin Netanyahu when he did the graphic with the bomb. And we needed that kind of speech. This was not a rally speech that Donald Trump gave out in Springfield, Missouri. This is a speech. He walked right in. He looked right in the faces of the North Koreans and the Iranians and the rest of the world. That's why I think it was courageous. This is not a friendly room in there. This was not a warm and cuddly group of people that wanted to like Donald Trump. You know what I like? He doesn't care if they like him.
Yeah.
He wants them to respect the United States of America. That's what we need in a president.
But will they get behind him?
I mean, it's interesting. He paused at one point where he thought that folks were going to applaud, and when they didn't, someone said he seemed to be basking in their disdain. That was on Twitter. I don't want to steal that line. It seemed like a good one. I thought it was interesting that this is an organization who has again and again censured Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu.
Yes.
Today it looked like there was no daylight between the two. You saw cutaways of Benjamin Netanyahu smiling and nodding during the speech. And I wonder out there of people who think that the president is anti-Semitic, how they reconcile that view of him with what went on today. And I'm really asking that as a serious question, because you see that all over, and and that's, you know, one of those things, especially that we heard after Charlottesville and the like. And I wonder how they reconcile what happens today.
You know, we've been hearing that Vladimir Putin of Russia is wanting to open talks with North Korea and certain other people. He's not there. China didn't show up.
Yeah.
Yesterday, Angela Merkel of Germany didn't sit at that table. It's amazing to me who's missing and who stood up. And now, really, the world is focused on this president. So I'm fascinated as we look forward the role that he plays now and how the rest of the world will react to this. I want to see what they will say. Does this move the needle at all? Does this change the game at all, the speech that he gave yesterday? Or today, rather.
The one thing I'm convinced of is that Donald Trump does not play Mother May I. He does not walk into a room and says, would it be okay if you guys don't mind and if it wouldn't upset anybody if I did X? He goes in and he says, this is what we're going to do, like it or lump it. Now, I'm sorry, but there's just enough of some grit down inside of me that I want our president to show that level of strength. God bless him for doing it. I thought it was exactly spot on what needed to be done.
And speaking of some of the details specifically, as you heard the president saying, he went on the attack on Iran for its culture of death, says it must respect sovereign rights of its people. This is just one of the very forceful things that he said when it came to that.
Well, and it's all true, too. I mean, Iran has been one of the world's largest state sponsors of terrorism since the 1980s. And I think he's also tried to counter Iran. What we saw before with his trip to the Gulf states and meeting with over 50 Arab leaders, that was in part to try to contain Iran. So, again, a different policy than what we saw from President Obama, who is greeted much more differently. The last time he had visited Saudi Arabia with the king not even meeting him at the airport. So I think we saw President Trump really try to differentiate himself from the previous administration, specifically in regard to North Korea and also in Iran. And additionally, and just even the way that he spoke, as you had mentioned, in such direct and strong terms as well.
Again, it fascinates me. He showed up. Some of those others didn't. The ones who keep talking, Putin, didn't.
All right. Much more on President Trump's first speech at the UN, his America First vision, now shared on the world stage, how that's going over with foreign leaders and with his base right here at home. Plus, some stunning comments from Hillary Clinton as she says she will not rule out challenging the results of the 2016 election.
Oh my gosh, I just fainted.
But that's not sitting well with some Democrats at this moment, or even those in the mainstream media, if you can believe that. We'll break that one down for you. And after the show, you can join our live chat by clicking the Overtime tab at foxnews.com/outnumbered or go to facebook.com/outnumberedfnc. And of course, you can tweet us right now during the show. We look at them. See you there.
Can no longer be taken advantage of or enter into a one-sided deal where the United States gets nothing in return. As long as I hold this office, I will defend America's interests above all else.
You watched it here live. That was President Trump giving his first address to the United Nations General Assembly today. We already talked about how he took aim at North Korea and singled out Iran. But he framed his speech to world leaders in a way that is very different from his predecessor. The president talked up America's accomplishments and urged every UN member to embrace sovereignty.
We can no longer be taken advantage of or enter into a one-sided deal where the United States gets nothing in return. As long as I hold this office, I will defend America's interests above all else.
The president wrapped up that part of his address with this.
As President of the United States, I will always put America first. Just like you, as the leaders of your countries, will always and should always put your countries first.
So earlier in the hour, that's what I was talking about in terms of that inclusion. You know, make everybody the same in the room. Of course, you're doing the same thing that I'm doing.
I thought it was great. I mean, it was interesting. The little spattering of applause answers the question, what is the sound of one hand clapping? Now we know. But it was exactly right. All of those world leaders put their countries first. And if they don't, they have no business being the leader of their country. This is what you're elected to do. So why should anybody be somehow astonished that Donald Trump would use that message? And think of the contrast between what he said today and what Barack Obama has said at that same podium time and again when he went and basically apologized for America, admitted all of our sins and said we've done terrible things and we're so sorry we've done those things. I just thought that this was the President of the United States acting like the President of the United States and not someone who was coming in to beg forgiveness for who we are.
Let me remind you of some of those words that he used to compare that to President Obama's last address to the UN. He admitted that there were problems with, his words, a collision of cultures that globalism has caused. You remember that?
Well, you know, I would give Melissa the example of this with Saudi Arabia, who's in charge in a sideline fashion of women's issues at the United Nations. I mean, that's a country that needs some reputational management, putting it lightly, in terms of what people would say about it with regard to women's issues. But they got a seat at the table. They wanted a seat at the table. And what the president is saying, we're paying far much more than any other country. Our seat at the table will look different, and this is why.
And he added it would be worth it if we actually did what we were supposed to be doing here. And I liked what you said about the beginning, about him ending on an inclusive note, because it started with no stone left unturned. He sat there and he called out each member who was doing things that they shouldn't, and they even showed them on camera as he was calling them out.
That was awkward at times.
I mean, it was really something, and he was very tough. But when he got to the end, he was saying, our hope is a world of proud, independent nations that embrace their duties, seek friendships, respect others, and make common cause in the greatest shared interest of all, a future of dignity and peace for the people of this wonderful earth. Like you said, it was tough and strong, but it was like, let's actually do what we said we were supposed to do when we came together and we made this group. And let's stand up for all people and be honest and tough and truthful about what's really going on here. Sort of called everybody out, but it didn't have that edge of, you know, you're terrible and we're great. It was like, let's do what we said we came here for.
Right? It wasn't parental in that sense. I would say this, it was almost politically reminiscent of what the president just did on DACA with the Democrats and on other issues recently with the Democrats. He's willing to reach, he has his own plan, Lisa, but he's willing to reach across that aisle, whatever it is, world aisle, political aisle.
Well, yeah, as long as there's shared common interests involved, which is, I think, what he demonstrated as he spoke today. I liked, too, at the beginning where he was sort of talking about, here are all the things we can achieve. Here are the things we've achieved in the United States. Here are the things we can achieve in the world, whether it's technology, whether it's jobs, whether it's capitalism, building people up, bringing people out of poverty. But we can't do that if we allow these rogue regimes to continue on their way. And so I kind of liked that contrast of the two futures that we could set up if we want to work together with these common interests or not. But I also think that there's been a lot of myths about the president busted in terms of, one, you know, people were saying that President Trump couldn't rely on his advisors. That has not been true. You look at someone like Nikki Haley, who's really been a strong leader at the UN, or even someone like Secretary Mattis. And they've also said he's an isolationist, but he's demonstrated that that's not true either.
So we knew from reporting yesterday that they would be part and parcel to writing the script as well for this speech. You often play the role of devil's advocate. Everything comes with a risk, and you heard Netanyahu say that this was courageous by this president. Are there any, maybe, I don't know, hot coals that he needs to look
Well, there's
out
one thing for sure, is he lived up to the expectations. He lived up to the hype that the White House was, you know, working up in anticipation of this speech, because before the speech, a White House official said that the president will not appeal to a top-down model of global bureaucracy. Instead, he's going to champion the nation state. He's going to encourage burden sharing and global issues. As Melissa said, he left no stone unturned. We're just going to have to see what how the world reacts to this, because we're still just minutes after the speech.
Yep. All right, we'll move on. A new report that investigators wiretapped President Trump's former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, before and after the 2016 presidential election. What does it mean for the Russia investigations? Are we up to 6 of them now, I believe? And Hillary Clinton is ratcheting up her critique of the presidential race, now saying she won't rule out contesting the results if more Russian interference is proven. What to make of that? She wants to look at the election results, whether her comments are going to hurt the Democratic Party. We're coming right back.
A Russia probe bombshell. U.S. investigators reportedly wiretapped President Trump's former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, both before and after the 2016 election. That's according to CNN, which also reports the government's snooping continued into early this year, including a period when Manafort was known to talk to President Trump. Meantime, the New York Times is reporting that prosecutors on special counsel Robert Mueller's team told Manafort they planned to indict him after agents raided his home in July. Manafort has become a focus of various investigations into alleged Russian efforts to tilt the 2016 election toward Mr. Trump. All right. Another question of how does this change things?
Well, first of all, I think it's fascinating. It was CNN who made such sport of Donald Trump when he said that he was being wiretapped. What a clown he was. What an idiot he was. Now they're the ones supposedly breaking the story that he was, in fact, wiretapped with Paul Manafort. But they don't even make the connection to their own dots, which is amazing to me. They don't come out and say, we thought something, we were wrong. By gosh, there were wiretaps. Judge Napolitano made a great point this morning on Fox Business that's worth repeating. There are two kinds of wiretaps. If it's a FISA wiretap, then none of that was gathered can be used against Paul Manafort in a criminal case.
That's an important point, yeah.
If it was a Article 3 wiretap and they had to go before a judge, then it could be. But the question is, why did they engage in that wiretap? This is frightening, and a lot of people are maybe sitting at home, their eyes glazed over. Let me just say to every one of our viewers, this matters to you. This matters.
Absolutely.
If your government can just decide that it's going to tap into your phones because you played a political role that somebody in the government didn't want you to play, I'm sorry, that scares the bejeebies out of me.
Well, and it's not just the actual wiretaps or whether it was FISA or what kind of paperwork went through. From what I'm reading, they doubled down and went back for more. I mean, they were extended on into the campaign and even after the election. So if they weren't getting what they were looking for before, what were they looking for? What were they finding or not finding?
But I also have a problem with just these leaks, period. I mean, because we have Robert Mueller right now, and we've already had all these questions and concerns over institutions and faith in institutions. And then you have Robert Mueller, who is supposed to be independent, who's supposed to give Americans comfort that this isn't going to be a partisan investigation, that we can truly believe whatever the outcome and determinations he's come to. But then you have leaks like this that come forward that, considering the fact that we don't know enough about this, so it leads to wild speculation, it leads to distrust. And then you couple that with what we've seen, Daily Caller reporting that of the 9 individuals on his team that have collectively donated $65,000 to Democrats, recently hiring another attorney that has given to Democrats. So when you have this, you have the leaks coupled with that, it really leads to distrust and questions of it. If this is this truly independent or not?
Let me disagree with you guys just a little bit, because you can see a rationalization for why you would be listening into his phone calls based on the reports we've seen about his financial records. I mean, maybe there was a reason, Paul Manafort, that maybe there is a reason to be seeing what Paul Manafort, who he might be talking to with relation to the election. What worries me is that we'll never know for sure everyone who saw that information. Was it shared? I mean, were the recordings shared? Was the information shared? I mean, while you could stand there and justify why it might be done, I don't think we'll ever really know who got the benefit of whatever information was heard on there. And that's where I think the real problem could be, and that's what worries me.
All I know is Governor Huckabee just said it scares the bejeebies out of him.
Yes.
That scares me.
It does. Well, look, if the federal government wants to come get you, Sandra, they'll find a way. And it may not be that they end up getting you for what they went after, but there are enough statutes on the books, and here's what they can do. Even if they can't get you for something that's really big, they can say, we're going to put your husband under indictment unless you cop the plea. And if you do, then this is all going to go away. There are a lot of people I've known personally who have been bankrupted, their reputations ruined. They ended up winning, but they were finished.
Yeah, they spent everything they had trying to defend themselves.
And the federal government is using your tax dollars to come after you, and you have to use your own dollars to fight them off.
Well, and
There's
Governor,
something wrong with that.
I'd love to get your thoughts on this, because stunning new comments coming from Hillary Clinton about the legitimacy of the 2016 election. Listen to this exchange on NPR.
Would you completely rule out questioning the legitimacy of this election if we learn that the Russian interference in the election is even deeper than we know now?
No, I would not. I would say...
You're not going to rule it out?
No, I wouldn't rule it out.
And a Clinton spokesperson clarifying in a statement, Secretary Clinton has said repeatedly, the results of the election are over, but we have to learn what happened. I would hope anyone in America, as Harris laughed, anyone in America concerned about the integrity of our democracy would feel the same way if we got there. But we're not. But that's not sitting well with some Democrats or Harris, and even some in the mainstream media who say she could be hurting her own party. Watch.
She was asked whether she could rule it out, and I think it's fair she didn't rule it out. I think there's a bigger challenge for Democrats here because she's going to be out there a lot for this book tour. She has every right to write the book, every right to be out there, but it really distracts from Democrats trying to rebuild the party, trying to be out there with a message, trying to talk about the economy and health care, because people are going to be talking about whether we should relitigate the election. That's not a good place for us to be.
There is a question about letting the next generation of leaders speak. Look, she's a very powerful woman, and she has a message, and she has a lot to say, and she's been doing a lot of interviews. And again, no one questions her right to do any of that. But it does mean less attention for the Kamala Harrises and Al Frankens and Cory Bookers of the world.
Look,
Harris, yeah, I've got it. You said you were going to faint. I've got to get your thoughts on this.
You mean to tell me that because one person is talking, you can't get out an entire message for a party? It's not like she's talking from the bully pulpit of the White House. That's ridiculous. That is a cop-out on the part of that particular Democrat. And if she's speaking for everybody else, I'd call her and say, please don't speak for me. But what happened now really does need a question mark behind it for her. Seriously, every day it's a new reason why she didn't win. I have one question. How's the book tour coming? Is she selling a lot of books? Because this sounds like she might want to be trying to sell.
And Governor, I've got a question for you. So I've been thinking about this, and before we were talking about Manafort, and I'd mentioned, there's been a lot of discussions about faith in institutions and Americans not having faith in institutions. And you've seen the Democratic Party repeatedly talk about Russia undermining trust in the electoral process, et cetera, et cetera. But then she goes and says something like that, or she calls for the abolishment of the Electoral College, or we saw Democrats calling for electors to defect. Does that not undermine Americans' faith in the system?
It totally does. If you can change the rules in the middle of the game, you don't have a game. If you want to change the rules, you change it before the game begins. But once the game begins, you can't change the rules. Look, I think there's one solution to this with Hillary, is to have a big banquet in Washington, let the Republicans sponsor it and pay for it, and they can award her a participation trophy, and that way she will feel much better of having... Come on, Sandra.
Would you attend this?
Everybody gets a trophy.
I absolutely support Governor Huckabee's idea. I think it's a great idea.
Thank you.
Yes, I think it's a great idea. I don't think it would be. I don't think it would be that helpful to Mrs. Clinton because she wants to be in charge. But I don't know. I think this is going to go on and on and on. I do think it actually does take air from the Democrats trying to rebuild because
you do?
I do, because I think it fires up those same arguments that kind of fell flat. The idea that, every time they say we got more electoral votes, you really won. They keep doing that joke. And you're like, but you may get more yards in the football game. You still don't win because it's not based on yards. It's based on points.
But Melissa, if you let the loser define where you're going forward, you're not going to win. And that's effectively what they're letting her do. She lost the election. She keeps reminding us of all the 99 reasons why. She blames everybody.
I'm going to assume, Governor Huckabee, that your party welcomes Hillary Clinton's presence in this amount.
They would for that, I guarantee you.
And we've seen deep divides in the Democratic Party, so surely this doesn't help. But on another deep divide in the Democratic Party, which we're going to get to, immigration activists shutting down a Nancy Pelosi news conference over her efforts to work with President Trump.
You don't know what you're talking about.
So how worried should Pelosi be? And does this show the perils of Democrats working with the president? Stay tuned.
Activists shouting down House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi over her willingness to work with President Trump to pass immigration reform. At her own news conference yesterday, this happened. Watch.
Do you want to hear an answer, or do you just want to shout? Do you want to listen, or do you just want to shout? Just stop it now. Just stop it now. Let's stop it now. Stop it. Look. You are not helping the cause. Since you don't want to listen, we'll have to just go. You don't want to listen.
Yikes.
Take that one in.
But despite the incident, Pelosi insists she's doing her best to protect the rights of dreamers in the U.S.
We believe that our immigrant community makes America more American, and we want comprehensive immigration. I'd rather have that, of course, than just one piece of it, the Dream Bill. But we don't have that opportunity right now. But they don't want the Dream. I mean, they made it clear they don't want the Dream Act. And that's an area of disagreement that we have in terms of tactic.
Wow. We're all like stunned silence. So now I know
her facial reaction was amazing.
Now I know what a major legislator looks like, because that's what she calls herself.
Yeah.
She's big time. She's like, I'm a major.
All right, Governor Huckabee, don't hold back.
Well, no, I was watching this and I thought this is looking like a school teacher who has completely lost control of her classroom.
Yes.
Totally lost control.
Yeah.
And you could tell she wanted to backhand some of those people.
She wanted to say shut up, too.
Yeah,
you
she
could
did.
feel that.
And I guess she was probably completely stunned that these people who are supposedly her pals have turned on her. I mean, that's got to hurt.
But I find there's a real sense of irony here because Nancy Pelosi has attended resistance rallies, has encouraged resistance to President Trump, and then here she is getting resisted, and she's encouraged illegality, lawlessness, and then here she is, the recipient of all of that. So, I mean, there's a real sense of irony here, but I think it also underscores the problems of the Democratic Party. President Trump can't just rely on the Democratic Party if he wants to get something done on DACA, because as you've seen with these activists, there's going to be a real deep divide in the Democratic Party as well. So he's going to have to get Republicans to come on board as well.
Governor Huckabee, though, there was a way to handle that. And that definitely wasn't it.
There was.
And I've thought this through because I think that's probably the fourth time I've watched that. And I think we all feel really uncomfortable and almost concerned for her safety, too, because they get really close. There was an opportunity there, wasn't there, for her to, this was her own news conference. You know what? Let's turn the cameras off. Let's step away from the podium. Let's sit down. Let's talk. I don't know. Do you have a better solution for how she
Look,
handled that?
I always believe that when things are escalating, and I've been in speeches where I've been heckled and all that, so I've been there. But the way you do it, you don't want to escalate it. You want to de-escalate it. So when the crowd is getting angry and getting louder, you get softer. Your soft voice is what will cause things to go
finger
down.
pointing is interesting.
Your
That's an
inside
interesting
voice,
move.
as I like to say to my kids. So the California Attorney General Becerra is defending the Dreamers. He says that they are, quote, stressed. And so he's looking at this as the total picture, that they took that angst and that stress to the podium where Nancy Pelosi is. I'm confused, though, about what the Democratic message is on DACA. Do they know? Because they're stressed out, because maybe they're hearing one thing from their leaders and they're seeing their leaders do another thing. I mean, maybe it's not on the Dreamers, it's on the Democrats.
But they lost control of the whole issue, because what Donald Trump did was say, look, this should be a legislative matter. Constitutionally, I can't just fix it. Obama tried to, but he really couldn't, and admitted he couldn't. So because it's legislative, rather than me just end it immediately, you got 6 months. That's plenty of time for you guys to do your job. Nancy Pelosi is in that body to do her job. If she can't do it, then she needs to go and admit, I'm not a great legislator after all, because I can't get it done.
The irony is that she was in this case doing her job, and she said that she was helping them. She was helping them because she's going to the person in charge and making a deal. And folks on the right, were mad at President Trump for going and talking to her about DACA. I mean, they came out and they were saying that they won, and they did get, I mean, they were making headways. I actually think she was right. And those protesters, I understand how worried and fearful they are. But she did actually advance their cause.
But I think they have a right to be mad at Nancy Pelosi, though, because her and the Democratic Party told immigration activists that this is one of their #1 priorities. This is one of the top things when President Obama got elected. And what did? They had both bodies of Congress and the White House. They failed to get immigration done. They went with Obamacare instead. So immigration clearly wasn't the #1 priority of that Congress and of President Obama. And so now these individuals are left where they currently are because President Obama moved forward with a program that was unconstitutional. And now Congress is sort of left to deal with what President Obama created.
But I see what you're saying, though, Melissa. I mean, the one thing that she and Schumer have delivered is actually moving this down the road in a fashion that doesn't leave the big question mark of what am I going to do if I'm in this country? Am I being deported because I'm a German? I mean, they're trying to finalize and get an answer. They're looking for a solution. And in that way, they are doing their jobs. I think Sandra's right, though. She missed an opportunity, just like I've watched some of those town halls on health care in the past devolve. She missed an opportunity to sit down, put away the spotlight, and really connect as human beings.
Because she's not used to that kind of pressure from